It was supposed to be the happiest time of their lives, a romantic honeymoon getaway at a luxurious resort in Fiji. But paradise quickly turned into a nightmare when newlywed Christe Chen was found brutally murdered, lying in a pool of her own blood. Her husband, Bradley Dawson, mysteriously vanished, leaving behind only his phone and a trail of unanswered questions. How did a picture-perfect love story spiral into such a tragic end? Today, on True Crime Stories, we uncover the shocking details of a honeymoon that ended in horror. Before we dive in, let us know, where are you watching from? We love hearing from you. Don't forget to subscribe to True Crime Stories for more gripping cases just like this. Christe Chen had always imagined her wedding as the most beautiful day of her life. Born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, Christe was a beloved member of her community, known as a talented pastry chef who delighted locals with delicate cakes and handcrafted pastries. Her friends and family described her as vibrant and kind, a bright light whose positivity could uplift any room she entered. Bradley Robert Dawson was seen as equally promising, a young professional in the IT department at a local children's welfare nonprofit. Bradley was known for his calm demeanor and quiet confidence. He was steady and reliable, exactly the kind of man Christe's parents imagined for their only daughter. By all outward appearances, Christe and Bradley were the ideal couple, attractive, successful, deeply in love, and seemingly destined for a beautiful future together. Their wedding, held in February 2022, was nothing short of spectacular. Friends and family gathered at a beautiful venue in downtown Memphis, where string lights softly illuminated an elegantly decorated reception hall. Christe's parents, brimming with pride, watched as their daughter exchanged vows with the man who had promised to cherish and protect her forever. Bradley's vows were particularly touching. He spoke eloquently about how Christe had made him a better man, how he couldn't imagine life without her, and how he would dedicate himself fully to making her happy every day. After the ceremony, as guests danced and laughed, Christe's best friend Jessica recalled pulling Christe aside and asking her how she felt. "I've never been happier," Christe replied, her eyes shining. "Everything feels perfect." And at that moment, it truly seemed it was. After the excitement of the wedding settled, Christe and Bradley planned a luxurious honeymoon that matched the fairy tale they were building together. They didn't rush. Instead, they chose to wait until July, allowing themselves time to settle into their new lives as a married couple. Christe was transitioning from her career as a pastry chef, deciding to pursue her dream of becoming a pharmacist. Bradley supported this shift fully, encouraging her academic ambitions. Friends admired the mutual respect and support that seemed to characterize their relationship. When the couple finally boarded their flight to Fiji that summer, anticipation was high. They had chosen an exclusive destination, the famous Turtle Island Luxury Resort, a private paradise nestled in the sparkling turquoise waters of the Pacific. This was no ordinary resort, made famous by the 1980 classic film The Blue Lagoon, starring Brooke Shields. Turtle Island was known for its pristine beaches, lush tropical landscape, and world-class amenities. The resort promised secluded villas, gourmet dining, private beaches, and a dedicated personal concierge to ensure every guest experienced true paradise. Arriving at Turtle Island felt like stepping into another world entirely. As Christe and Bradley stepped off the boat onto the powdery white sand, they were welcomed by friendly staff members who greeted them warmly, placing fragrant flower leis around their necks and guiding them to their private bungalow overlooking the sea. The villa itself was stunning, rustic yet luxurious, decorated with fresh flowers and lush greenery, large open windows framing breathtaking views of crystal clear water. Everything was designed for comfort and intimacy, precisely the romantic escape Christe had envisioned. Their first days at Turtle Island unfolded like a dream. They swam in secluded lagoons, walked hand in hand along pristine beaches, and enjoyed romantic meals under the stars. Christe frequently sent updates to her friends and family back home, pictures of sunsets over the ocean, snapshots of beautifully plated meals, and candid selfies where she and Bradley beamed with joy. "I've never seen Christe look happier," Jessica would later say, recalling the images Christe shared. "She looked radiant, absolutely radiant. Bradley seemed so attentive, so loving. It really did seem like they had it all. Yet, paradise can often obscure reality, and as perfect as everything seemed on the surface, cracks began to appear beneath the veneer of bliss. It started subtly, minor disagreements that neither Christe nor Bradley gave much thought to initially. They brushed off these moments as trivial, typical growing pains of newlyweds adjusting to life together in close quarters, even on a perfect island retreat. After all, honeymoon arguments were common, weren't they? But these small disagreements slowly began to grow. According to resort staff who later recalled their interactions with the couple, Christe and Bradley appeared noticeably tense during a private dinner on the evening of July 8, 2022. The dinner was set up romantically on the beach under a canopy of softly glowing lights, the kind of setting most couples could only dream of. Yet, even in paradise, tension was evident. Staff members noted that the couple spoke quietly at first, their conversation becoming progressively more heated as the meal went on. What exactly caused this tension remained unclear, but the mood shifted unmistakably. Other guests remembered hearing raised voices later that evening, coming from the direction of the couple's bungalow, though at the time it seemed merely like a lover's quarrel, unpleasant but not unusual. Resort staff, trained in discretion, gave the couple space, assuming the disagreement would resolve itself overnight. Sadly, nothing could have been further from the truth. On the morning of July 9th, resort staff noticed the couple hadn't appeared for their scheduled breakfast. Not particularly unusual, they assumed perhaps the pair were sleeping in. But when lunchtime came and passed with still no sign of Christe or Bradley, concern began to mount. Turtle Island was exclusive, with highly attentive staff well acquainted with guests' routines and schedules. It was unlike honeymooners, particularly this seemingly happy couple, to remain unseen for such an extended period without notifying anyone. Finally, resort staff decided to perform a welfare check at the couple's bungalow. Knocking gently, a staff member received no response. After a few more attempts to reach them, a growing unease settled among the staff, prompting them to enter the villa. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Lying motionless on the floor of the bungalow was Christe Chen, her body covered in blood, the scene around her in chaos. Her injuries were horrific: severe blunt force trauma to her head, extensive bruising, deep cuts, and a significant wound across her back. The level of brutality inflicted on Christe was so severe that it immediately ruled out any possibility of an accident. The scene pointed to a violent and intentional attack, shocking in its savagery, especially within such tranquil surroundings. Frantically, staff searched for Bradley Dawson. He was nowhere to be found. Panic spread through the resort. Authorities on the island were immediately called and arrived swiftly. Investigators combed the bungalow, gathering evidence and taking photographs of the scene. Christe's phone and personal items were untouched, her belongings neatly placed, indicating that robbery or outside intervention was unlikely. Everything pointed grimly towards Bradley. A quick search of the premises revealed troubling clues. Bradley's phone and smartwatch had been deliberately left behind, likely to avoid GPS tracking. His passport and wallet, however, were missing, suggesting a clear intention to flee. But where could he have gone on such a small island? Police soon discovered that Bradley had taken a kayak from the resort's dock and paddled away sometime during the night. It was an astonishing decision, reflecting desperation and a deeply flawed escape strategy. After all, this was a remote archipelago in the South Pacific. Authorities scrambled into action, launching an immediate and extensive search operation. Boats and helicopters scoured the surrounding waters and nearby islands, knowing that Bradley couldn't have gone far without being spotted. 36 hours after Christe's body was discovered, Bradley Dawson was finally found. He was stranded on a remote, uninhabited island a short distance from Turtle Island. Bradley's condition when found, disheveled, exhausted, and disoriented, seemed to reflect more panic and regret than calculated escape. Bradley Dawson was immediately arrested and brought into custody. News of the incident spread quickly, first among resort guests and then around the globe, catching international headlines. The story was sensational, deeply disturbing, and almost unimaginable in its brutality and betrayal. How could a man who, just months earlier, had vowed eternal love and devotion, commit such an unthinkable crime against his wife? Christe's parents were shattered by the news. Not only were they grappling with the horrific murder of their only child, but they also faced the devastating reality that Christe's body had suffered such extensive trauma that it could not be embalmed and transported home. Their beloved daughter had to be cremated on the island, her ashes carried back to the United States. The cruelty and violence of her final moments left a lasting, painful scar on everyone who had known and loved her. Back in Memphis, the community reeled in shock. Friends gathered to mourn the bright, vivacious woman they had all cherished, struggling to reconcile the image of Bradley Dawson, the kind and gentle IT worker they had all known, with the heinous crime he was accused of committing. Questions flooded their minds. Had there been signs? Had Christe confided in anyone about struggles within their marriage? Could something have been done to prevent this tragedy? Initial investigations revealed little about Bradley's motives. When questioned by police, Bradley initially maintained silence, appearing detached and withdrawn, eventually stating only that what had happened was an accident. His lawyer later claimed Bradley panicked and fled out of shock upon realizing Christe was dead. The explanation was met with skepticism by investigators and public opinion alike. The extreme violence inflicted upon Christe made the notion of a simple accident deeply implausible. As Bradley remained incarcerated in Fiji awaiting trial, international interest in the case intensified. Media from around the world sought every detail they could uncover, turning a tragic personal loss into a global spectacle. Experts weighed in, speculating about domestic abuse, hidden anger, or even psychological instability, desperate to explain how something so shocking could have occurred between two people who seemed to embody happiness. Former prosecutor Florina Schiller explained in interviews, homicides like these are typically crimes of rage. It's very rare for this level of violence to emerge without prior warning signs. Often, there's a hidden pattern of control, anger, or abuse. Yet, Christe's friends and family struggled to recall any clear indicators of danger. Bradley had no criminal record, and no one remembered seeing Christe with unexplained injuries or expressing fear regarding her marriage. However, domestic violence experts reminded the public that abusers often conceal their behaviors effectively, making tragedies like this all the more shocking when they eventually surface. Bradley's trial date was set, but it was nearly 2 years away. With Bradley held in Fiji, legal complexities slowed the process. The Chen family, desperate for answers and justice, faced a long, arduous wait for closure. As months passed, new details slowly emerged, painting a disturbing picture of a marriage that may not have been as idyllic as it appeared. But questions lingered. What drove Bradley Dawson to commit such a brutal act of violence against the woman he had once promised to love and cherish? The trial loomed, promising revelations and perhaps, finally, answers to the mystery that had captured the world's attention. Until then, the island paradise where Christe Chen lost her life remained haunted by a crime as baffling as it was horrific, a chilling reminder that appearances even in paradise can be devastatingly deceiving. The early morning sun illuminated the serene waters surrounding Turtle Island, gently casting golden ripples across the turquoise lagoon. Birds sang softly, the breeze was warm, and the palm trees swayed gently. A picturesque scene that starkly contrasted the horror unfolding at one of Fiji's most exclusive luxury resorts. In bungalow number 14, a harrowing discovery had shattered the tropical paradise illusion, casting an ominous shadow over what had started as a dream honeymoon. Resort manager Kalani Tui stood frozen near the entrance to the suite, his breathing uneven, a sickening heaviness settled deep within his chest. He had seen many things during his tenure in luxury hospitality, but nothing had prepared him for this. Christe Chen lay lifeless on the polished wooden floor, partially obscured by shadows cast by sunlight, peeking through half-drawn curtains. Her delicate face, once glowing with joy just days before, was battered and barely recognizable. Kalani's gaze swept across the once tidy suite, now a chaotic scene of horror. Cushions lay strewn across the floor, a shattered lamp lay in pieces by the bedside, and splatters of blood stained the pristine white linen sheets. Trembling slightly, Kalani stepped back into the corridor, unable to continue staring at the haunting scene. "Call the authorities," he whispered urgently to a nearby staff member, a young woman named Amara who stood clutching the doorframe, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Call them now." Amara turned and rushed down the winding pathway toward the resort's main reception area, her sandals pounding against the stone walkway. The serenity of the resort seemed to mock her panic, lush flowers brushing against her arms as she raced past smiling guests, oblivious to the tragedy just meters away. Minutes later, 2 Fijian police officers arrived swiftly by boat, their uniforms sharply contrasting against the casual vacation attire of the resort's stunned guests. Detective Inspector Ratu Dalo, a seasoned investigator known for his calm yet unrelenting demeanor, immediately took control of the chaotic scene. "Secure this area," he commanded firmly, pointing to his junior officers as he carefully stepped inside the bungalow, his dark eyes narrowing as he surveyed the grim scene. Kneeling beside Christe's body, Ratu studied the injuries, a series of vicious blows that spoke of rage, of someone utterly unhinged. The brutality was disturbing even for someone with decades of experience handling violent crimes. "Where is her husband?" Ratu's deep voice demanded, cutting through the silence that hung thickly within the bungalow. Kalani shook his head, visibly shaken. "We can't find him. They argued last night at dinner. Guests overheard them shouting, but nobody thought it would escalate into this." Ratu rose to his feet, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Find him," he ordered. "Search the entire island, check every room, every boat, every kayak." As officers scattered, questioning stunned vacationers and combing through every inch of the small, secluded resort, a growing sense of dread filled the detective. Where could Bradley Dawson have gone? With the Pacific Ocean surrounding the resort, escape seemed improbable, and yet the suspect had vanished without a trace. Bradley Dawson's heart pounded violently in his chest as he propelled the kayak through choppy waves, sweat stinging his eyes. Panic clawed at his throat, blurring his vision, making his desperate attempt at escape seem increasingly futile. He gripped the paddle tighter, hands trembling as the weight of his actions pressed down heavily upon him. Just hours before, his world had been simple. Christe by his side, laughter echoing through candlelit dinners, warm sand beneath their toes. Now, the memory of her lifeless body haunted him. He couldn't recall clearly how things had escalated so drastically, how a petty argument spiraled violently out of control. "She shouldn't have pushed me," he muttered under his breath, desperately trying to rationalize the horror. "She shouldn't have—" His words faltered, swallowed by the crashing waves around him. The island he'd aimed for loomed ahead, little more than a jagged patch of vegetation-covered rocks jutting from the sea. Exhausted, Bradley maneuvered the kayak ashore, collapsing onto the wet sand, his lungs burning with exertion. The harsh cries of seabirds echoed above him as reality slowly crept back into his consciousness. He was trapped, surrounded by water, isolated on a barren strip of land. The island offered no shelter, no hiding place from the magnitude of his crime. Bradley's fingers brushed his pockets instinctively, the reassuring presence of his passport and wallet, the only tangible lifelines he'd brought from the resort. He'd intentionally abandoned his phone and watch, hoping to evade tracking, but now, alone and vulnerable, he realized he'd left himself with no means of communication or escape. As night began to fall, darkness enveloped the isolated island, bringing with it a relentless wave of despair. Bradley curled into a ball against a jagged rock, his clothing damp, the salty spray of the ocean stinging his face. Christe's face haunted him relentlessly, her terrified eyes, her bloodied features, each image striking him with ruthless clarity. "I didn't mean it," he whispered desperately into the oppressive darkness, his voice trembling. "Please, God, I didn't mean it." Back on Turtle Island, the investigation intensified. Detective Inspector Ratu meticulously gathered evidence, photographing every detail of the bungalow and painstakingly documenting each trace of struggle. News of the tragic death began filtering through international media, spreading rapidly as Christe's family and friends in Memphis received devastating phone calls that would forever alter their lives. At Christe's childhood home, her mother, Helen Chen, collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Christe had always been their greatest joy, their cherished only child, whose dreams and ambitions filled them with pride. Now, instead of welcoming their daughter home from a honeymoon filled with joy, they faced a grim reality, preparing to retrieve her ashes from an island thousands of miles away. The grief was unbearable. Helen stared blankly at photos of Christe lining the mantelpiece, each capturing moments of carefree happiness. Christe baking intricate pastries at culinary school, laughing with friends, standing radiant in her wedding gown next to Bradley. Each memory felt like a cruel betrayal now, tainted by the unimaginable violence that had taken their daughter from them. "How did we not see it?" Helen whispered, voice shaking. "How could we not know?" John Chen, Christe's father, squeezed his wife's shoulder gently, tears welling silently in his eyes. "We trusted him. We trusted that he would care for her, protect her." Their pain intensified as more details emerged. Christe's injuries were too extensive for her body to be embalmed and returned home. They would never get the chance to say a proper goodbye, to hold her one last time. Their daughter, their beautiful, ambitious Christe, reduced to ashes, to a tragic headline. And yet, even amidst the unbearable sorrow, questions remained. How well did they truly know Bradley Dawson, the man they had welcomed into their family, whose kindness had seemingly won over everyone who knew him? Had there been hidden warning signs, subtle clues they missed? Across Memphis, friends and colleagues grappled with disbelief, struggling to reconcile the polite, soft-spoken IT professional with the man who now stood accused of brutally murdering his new wife. Social media exploded with shock and outrage, with former classmates and acquaintances posting disbelief and condolences, turning Christe and Bradley's seemingly picture-perfect life into a cautionary tale of hidden darkness. Back on the isolated island, Bradley Dawson's brief illusion of escape shattered as the rhythmic hum of a boat's engine broke through the morning stillness. He watched helplessly as the small police vessel approached, dread settling heavily upon him. His attempts to flee, to erase his involvement, had failed spectacularly. Detective Inspector Ratu, standing at the bow, locked eyes with Bradley as the boat drew closer. His gaze was cold, resolute. Bradley knew he would find no sympathy here. "Bradley Robert Dawson," the detective's voice rang out clearly across the waves. "You're under arrest for the murder of Christe Chen." As handcuffs snapped tightly around Bradley's wrists, he glanced one final time at the empty horizon, wishing desperately for a different outcome, for the chance to undo his actions. But it was too late. The peaceful paradise of Turtle Island, once a symbol of romance and luxury, would forever be marked by tragedy, a haunting reminder of violence hiding beneath a facade of love. The trial loomed ahead, bringing with it public scrutiny, revelations of secrets, and a community grappling with betrayal. And as the boat turned back toward the mainland, Bradley knew his fate was sealed. The idyllic honeymoon turned nightmare forever burned into his memory, and the world watching as justice awaited its course. 2 years had passed since the sun-drenched paradise of Turtle Island became synonymous with unspeakable tragedy. The brutal death of Christe Chen and the arrest of her husband, Bradley Dawson, had resonated far beyond Fiji's shores, capturing global attention. Now, inside a quiet, wood-paneled courtroom in Suva, Fiji's capital, the somber conclusion of this dark saga was about to unfold. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension, a silent blend of grief, anger, and expectancy. Christe's parents, Helen and John Chen, sat rigidly in the front row, hands clasped tightly, their eyes fixed upon the empty defendant's chair. Family friends flanked them, offering silent strength. The Chens had endured unimaginable pain since the murder, days and nights consumed by haunting images, relentless questions, and heartbreaking memories of their vibrant daughter. Helen Chen's face, once always filled with a gentle warmth, had grown weary with sorrow, the deep lines etched around her eyes a stark testament to her grief. John's normally strong and reassuring presence now seemed diminished, his once broad shoulders bent beneath the weight of profound loss. When Bradley Dawson finally entered, escorted by 2 uniformed guards, every gaze snapped toward him. He looked gaunt and diminished from the months spent behind bars in Fiji. His previously confident demeanor was replaced by an unsettling fragility. Dressed in a plain white shirt and gray trousers, his eyes darted nervously around the courtroom, deliberately avoiding the Chen's piercing gazes. "All rise," intoned the court bailiff, breaking the heavy silence. Judge Isia Koroy, known for his stern yet fair reputation, took his seat behind the imposing mahogany bench. His expression was solemn, reflecting the gravity of the moment. Bradley's attorney, Richard Mendez, a sharp, well-respected lawyer who had argued passionately throughout the trial, straightened his tie, taking a deep breath. Prosecutor Anila Sharma, composed and meticulous, had built an overwhelming case against Dawson, relying heavily on the forensic evidence and emotional testimonies of those who witnessed the couple's final days. Judge Coroy cleared his throat, capturing the attention of the courtroom. We gather today to render final judgment in a case that has deeply wounded many lives and shattered the sanctity of a place meant for joy and celebration, he began, his voice firm and deliberate. This court has carefully considered all evidence and testimony, meticulously examining each claim and counterclaim presented before us. Bradley shifted uneasily, his eyes fixed on the floor, desperately avoiding the judgmental stares and whispers echoing through the room. Mr. Dawson, Judge Coroy continued, directing his words sharply toward the defendant. Your claim that your wife's horrific injuries were the result of a tragic accident lacks any credible basis. The medical examiner testified explicitly that Christe Chen's injuries were consistent only with repeated intentional blows. The defensive wounds on her arms further indicated she was conscious and attempted to fend off your attack. A faint gasp escaped Helen Chen's lips, tears silently tracing familiar paths down her pale cheeks. John placed an arm around his wife, offering a strength he barely possessed himself. The judge pressed on, his voice unwavering, condemning in its quiet intensity. Your subsequent actions, fleeing the resort under cover of darkness, leaving behind your phone and GPS-equipped watch, and paddling to an isolated island, are not actions consistent with a grieving husband in shock, but rather those of a desperate individual attempting to evade responsibility. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, the tension mounting with each sentence. Bradley's shoulders slumped further, his previous bravado entirely stripped away. Given these considerations and the overwhelming weight of the evidence, the judge declared firmly, this court finds Bradley Robert Dawson guilty of the first-degree murder of Christe Chen. A wave of quiet relief mixed with lingering sorrow washed over the courtroom. Helen buried her face into John's shoulder, weeping softly, the verdict both a small measure of justice and a painful reminder of their loss. Judge Coroy paused briefly, then continued. In accordance with Fijian law, this conviction carries a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment. Mr. Dawson, you shall serve a minimum term of 18 years before being eligible for parole. May this sentence bring some form of solace to the grieving family and serve as a stern reminder of the sanctity of human life. The gavel fell sharply, punctuating the judgment with resounding finality. Bradley's face drained of all color as reality set in. This idyllic paradise that had promised marital bliss had now condemned him to spend decades behind bars, isolated in a foreign land, haunted forever by his violent actions. As the courtroom emptied, Helen and John Chen lingered in silence, their emotions raw. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement, desperate to capture the parents' grief in words. Finally, Helen stepped forward, her voice shaking but resolute. No mother should have to endure the nightmare we've faced, she began, her gaze firm despite the tremors in her voice. No parent should ever learn that their child, their joy, has had their life brutally stolen by someone they trusted and welcomed into their family. John stepped forward, his voice heavy with emotion. Christe was our only child. She was vibrant, loving, and full of dreams, dreams that were violently extinguished by the very person who vowed to cherish her. Each day since her passing has been a relentless battle to find meaning, to endure a life now utterly empty. He paused, voice cracking, then continued. We hope this sentence will prevent further harm, but it will never heal our broken hearts. Bradley Dawson stole not only our daughter's future, but ours as well. The reporters fell silent, touched deeply by the raw honesty and pain etched into every word. Thousands of miles away in Memphis, Tennessee, news of the conviction spread quickly through the community. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances struggled to reconcile the horrific details with the couple they once knew. At the nonprofit where Bradley once worked, colleagues gathered around television screens, stunned into silence as images from the Fiji courtroom filled the broadcast. Amanda Mitchell, Bradley's former manager, shook her head slowly, tears filling her eyes. He seemed so normal, so kind, she murmured softly. How did we not see the truth? Across town, at the bakery where Christe had once joyfully created intricate pastries, friends set up a small memorial corner filled with photographs, flowers, and heartfelt messages. Each picture captured Christe's radiant smile, a painful contrast to her tragic fate. She was a light, recalled her former culinary instructor, Margaret Baker. Every pastry she baked, every life she touched, was brighter because of her. The world lost someone truly special. Weeks after the trial, life at Turtle Island Resort resumed, yet a lingering shadow persisted. New guests walked the sandy paths, enjoyed the ocean breeze, and marveled at the lush surroundings, oblivious to the dark history. But the resort staff and local residents knew the island was forever marked. Manager Kalani Tui regularly visited the secluded bungalow, now quietly closed, unable to rent it out, haunted by memories of discovering Christe's body. He placed fresh flowers on the doorstep, whispering prayers of peace for her restless spirit. On the remote island where Bradley had briefly sought refuge, seabirds still cried mournfully, waves crashing relentlessly against the rocks, nature itself echoing the grief of a life taken far too soon. Inside his solitary prison cell, Bradley Dawson sat silently, his life reduced to 4 stark walls, his days stretched endlessly, filled only with regret, isolation, and guilt. Memories of Christe, her laughter, her joy, her terrified expression in those final moments were his constant companions, inescapable and unrelenting. Each night, he whispered apologies into the suffocating darkness, knowing they were meaningless, understanding forgiveness would never come. Not from Christe, not from her family, not even from himself. The paradise he had once shared with Christe now existed only in his tormented mind, a cruel reminder of what he destroyed. Back in Memphis, the Chen family's home stood quieter than ever, each room heavy with absence. Helen and John spent their days in quiet contemplation, surrounded by reminders of Christe's bright life. Their daughter's loss was permanent, their sorrow endless, but a new purpose slowly emerged: to advocate for victims of domestic violence, to warn others of hidden dangers lurking behind seemingly perfect lives. Together, they found strength in their mission, refusing to let Christe's death become a mere statistic. They spoke at schools, community centers, and events, sharing their story, warning others of the importance of recognizing the signs of abuse, no matter how subtle. In their darkest hours, this newfound purpose became their guiding light, a way to honor Christe's memory, to transform unbearable grief into hope, and to ensure no family ever endured a tragedy like theirs again. For though justice had been served, the scars left behind would never fully heal. What do you think of this tragic and chilling case? Could anything have prevented such a devastating outcome? Domestic violence often hides behind a perfect facade, and awareness can be life-saving. If you or someone you know is suffering from domestic abuse, please reach out immediately. There is always help available. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this case in the comments. And if you found today's story insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more powerful and compelling cases from true crime stories. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next video.